sound, a lot of people call it the lazy person's meditation because it just like it entrains our brain. Like we don't have to do anything. We just have to listen.
Yeah.
It's a really accessible way for people to just explore relaxation without having to have that discipline of silent meditation.
Hey, I'm Hannah, your host of Too Much, Not Enough. After a life-threatening burnout in 2021, I released the brittle version of success that was slowly killing me and built a life that feels as good as it looks. This podcast is for ambitious, soul-led humans ready to stop shrinking and start living big, bold, fully aligned lives. So if you've ever felt like too much and not enough, join me and my guests as we take an unfiltered deep dive into why being the real you was never the problem, and how to create a life your nervous system actually likes. Let's get into it. I think we've all had that moment when a song hits just right and emotion rises like a wave. Music has a way of moving us that logic can't quite explain. For many of us, it's medicine, helping us grieve, mend a broken heart, or hold the immense joy of simply being alive. If you're anything like me, you've probably wondered how music manages to do that, how it becomes more than lyrics and melody and touches something deeper within us. Well, that's exactly why I invited Bianca Lee to join me on today's episode of Too Much, Not Enough. Bianca is a certified sound therapy practitioner, artist, facilitator, and DJ. She creates immersive sound experiences designed to soothe the nervous system and spark reconnection. Her work bridges the worlds of wellness, creativity, and human connection, inviting us to slow down, listen deeply, and return to ourselves. We're going to dive into the intersection of sound and science, exploring how frequency, vibration, and intentional listening can become powerful tools for nervous system regulation, stress relief, and inner calm, all in a world that never stops buzzing. And more importantly, how to make therapeutic sound more accessible and integrated into our daily lives. So join us. Hello, Bianca. How are you doing today?
I'm really well. How are you, Hannah?
I'm so good. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Bianca and I have known each other for a while now.
Long time.
We actually met on Instagram.
Yes.
I think you were my first Instagram turned real life
clients.
Clients. We've sort of exchanged services over the years. And today we're going to be talking about your journey into sound therapy. So can you share with the listeners a little bit of how you got here?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey is a little wiggly, I'll say that. I have been working in the music industry for about a decade now as a professional DJ. And it was, I think, 2019 when I started to realize my DJ career. I was facing a bit of anxiety around it. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because the pandemic hit and all of my work essentially stopped, which I'm sure you can relate to.
Absolutely.
And it was interesting because it was at a time when, again, I was facing a lot of anxiety in my DJ career and I wasn't sure why that was happening. And the pandemic for me was a forced slowdown. It really opened my eyes to how much I was operating in a masculine energetic state and neglecting my feminine, the slow part of me. And so the pandemic really forced me to slow down. And at that point, I just was experimenting with so many different modalities when it came to kind of just slowing my body down. So I was leaning into yin style yoga, which is where you hold poses for 7 minutes. It's
the best.
So good.
It feels so good.
So I'm bawling bawling the whole time because it just it really unleashes things. Yeah. And then I also was doing a lot of meditation and using Insight Timer at the time, which is an app, meditation app. And I came across this course called Chakra Cleansing with Deep Cello by an artist named The Wong Janice. And it was essentially a course that helped you move through different emotions that were connected to the chakras using cello. And it was life-changing, feels a bit strong of a word, but it was truly life-changing. because I had been DJing and I knew there was like a therapeutic power of sound and music, but I never had experienced sound in an intentional way, like listening to it intentionally and what it could do with that
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
slower way too.
Yeah.
And so essentially at that point, I made the decision I wanted to study sound and music in a therapeutic context. So I started to research different programs. I found a school called the Institute of Traditional Medicine, which I had previously been attending some of their lectures. So I liked how they taught, like in there, and just the vibe. It was good. So I enrolled in a certification program to become certified as a sound therapy practitioner. And at the same time, also went back to school to study trauma at Wilfrid Laurier University because I knew that I wanted to be able to create safer spaces for folks to experience sound because I just knew it could unleash a lot.
Yes.
And also I just intuitively wanted to understand the nervous system. Like I knew that part of it was really important. And so that's kind of my journey. Like I went back to school to study sound, and today I'm doing kind of a bunch of different things with using sound ultimately though to help people reconnect with themselves.
You really are very multifaceted, very multidimensional in what you do. And I love the intentionality that you take in your sound therapy because it's not simply just facilitating and bringing people sound experiences, which is amazing. And I can attest, I've had sound baths from you and like, it's just stunning and so relaxing. And you're so dedicated to creating an experience for the end user, but also you are really steeped in research, right? Like you do a lot of, what would you call it? Like crowd group
Like experiments, really, like
yeah.
social experiments, kind of.
There,
Yeah,
yes, beautiful.
yeah,
Social
yeah.
experiments with sound. So you're not only going from the lens of, you know, as we all probably know, sound is therapeutic and sound feels good, but you are actually so intentional in the way that you study sound so that, like you said, you're creating experiences that really are actually therapeutic in nature and they help with emotional release and people navigating an anxiety and such. And so can you talk a little bit about first maybe how sound changed you personally, how it affected your system, and then from there, how you've kind of like led that into what you now provide to others?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. And I'll just say that it has always been really important to me to be able to appeal to more than just one kind of segment of people.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes sound baths or sound therapy will be found in like a yoga studio. And to me, I'm just like, everyone needs to know about sound, or at least needs to just be aware of what can be done because it's so accessible.
Yes.
Beyond, sound baths in a yoga studio. So to answer your first question, I would say from a nervous system perspective, I will go back and say like during the pandemic, I did notice a big shift in using sound in a slower context and how that really moved my nervous system from this fight or flight state back to like a ventral vagal or a more regulated state. So really shifting that use of music and sound from it being something that I'm like dancing to something that I'm just kind of intentionally like sitting or laying down to or meditating to was a big shift for me personally, I would say, and how I've helped others through that too. I think that was part of the second question.
Yeah. How have you sort of integrated that noticing of how you shifted receiving sound and how it changed you? How do you now incorporate that into the experiences that you curate?
Yeah. So I would say for me, I'm curious about how we can use sound to help people slow down. And so a lot of the experiences I curate are more, I think the word ambient is coming to mind. So it's more relaxed, like it's a more relaxed experience versus higher energy.
Yeah.
Because I do feel the world does veer a bit more into the masculine, bit more of like the high energy. And like we see music and sound as something that's going to hype us up, which, yes, it absolutely has that potential and it's great to do that. However, I'm more interested in the opposite. Like how can we slow down and how can we use sound and music in those respects? And I'll say like one specific moment I had that really kind of clued this into me was I went to this event in 2018, Burning Man.
Yeah.
And it was very much outside of my comfort zone because I'm not an extreme person. Like I don't like extreme heat. I don't like too much noise. I don't like too many people. Like I very much need kind of a balanced environment. And this was totally outside of my comfort zone. I was in the desert for like 2 weeks because we were helping to build parts of the camp and stuff.
Wow. Okay.
And so basically, there was one point at Burning Man where I was so overstimulated and I was having a really bad anxiety flare up. And I remember just biking out to the middle of the desert and I found this really beautiful sound and light installation that was playing really chilled classical music and people were just laying underneath it. And that was another moment where I was just kind of excited about the potential of what's possible when we use sound in a slower context. Like if we're anxious, like can we use sound to help soothe and regulate our nervous system by bringing that opposite energy to it?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And could we dig a little bit more into the science? Because one of the things I said sort of at the top of this episode is that like we all know music and sound moves us. Like I think that there's very few people probably listening who have not had an experience where they've listened to a song or it's reached a certain moment or they've been in a crowd at a festival or concert where you're overcome with emotion. And sometimes to your surprise, you're like, whoa, all of a sudden I feel like I want to cry. Where did that come from? And so we understand that happens, but I don't know that we understand so much why that happens. And maybe you could speak a little bit to like the science and how you've dug into, I know there's different like beats per minute or whatever of songs and different frequencies and all of that. Could you chat a little bit about that and maybe how that connects to the emotional part, to the nervous system regulation, to the reduction of anxiety?
Yeah, totally. So I just want to clarify one thing that's important to know is that so sound and music are different in the sense that sound is any auditory sensation or noise that we can hear, and music is organized sound. So music essentially has structures like melody, rhythm. And so while all music is sound, not all sound is music. So that's an important distinction, I think, for people to understand when it comes to looking at sound and music. So I'll speak kind of more from a sound perspective because that's where my research is based in.
Please.
So I think will be helpful to first identify, and you might have already talked about this on the podcast, is different brain states that we operate in.
We've dug into it a tiny bit, but I would love for you to share for sure.
Because I think this is good foundational knowledge. So the brain operates in different states based on how we're feeling and what we're doing. So there are 5 main brain states. So the slowest being delta, which is essentially when we're asleep, we're in this delta state. The next one would be theta, which is when we are meditating or just about to fall asleep. Next would be alpha, which is like passively relaxed. So maybe we're watching Netflix or just kind of chilling out.
Yeah.
After that would be beta, which kind of ranges from being just alert and doing work to total anxiety. And then finally, there's a gamma state, which ultimately is when we are cognitively processing things. So when we're like writing an essay, if people still do that, or like, or, when we're just like problem solving essentially.
Yeah.
And so we have these different brain states. And what happens with sound therapy is something called entrainment. So entrainment is a process by which 2 separate rhythmic processes synchronize. Can I demonstrate with my hands if that's okay?
Yeah, for sure.
And then maybe I'll kind of talk this out.
Yeah,
Well, I'll do my hand thing and then I'll kind of talk this out.
Yeah.
So essentially what's happening with a sound bath session or sound therapy is our brain is essentially firing at whatever rate it is. So see how my hands are kind of moving at different paces right now. Ultimately, when we're listening to, say, something that's therapeutic sound, our brain essentially syncs up and aligns to that frequency of the instrument. So ultimately, our brain syncs up to the frequency of the instrument. So say, kind of going back to those different brain states, if our brain is anxious, it's usually in a beta brain state. We can then listen to certain frequencies that then essentially shift it into, say, a delta brain state or a theta brain state, which is like that relaxed or even deep sleep state. And there's something called binaural beats, which have you heard of before?
I've heard of it, but I would love for you to share more about it because I just know it as the name, essentially.
Yeah. So binaural beats is a really great way, which essentially mirrors those 5 brain states. And binaural beats is an auditory phenomenon that happens when we listen to 2 similar but different frequencies in each ear. So essentially, you would need to use headphones or earphones, because what's happening is we're listening to two different frequencies in each ear.
Okay.
So one ear might be listening to a 10 hertz frequency and the other ear would be listening to, say, a 15 hertz frequency.
Yeah.
That difference is 5 hertz.
Yeah.
And that then is the binaural beat, which is in that theta range. So each brain state has a different range. And so the theta state is, say, between 4 and 8 hertz. And so anything within that will compose that like binaural beat essentially.
Cool.
And so there are tons of tracks, I'll call it that, on Spotify or on YouTube where you can search up different binaural beats or even brain states. And there'll be frequencies that help to essentially sync your brain into that particular desired state. So say if you're working and you want to increase like productivity or creativity, there's a lot of research that shows that 40 hertz, which is in that gamma range, can actually help with creativity, productivity, focus. And similarly with anxiety, there's research studies that show that listening to 30 minutes of binaural beats in the delta range specifically for 30 days or even up to 2 months can drastically reduce anxiety by just listening to, say, binaural beats for like 30 minutes a day.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it's so accessible. It's like, it's on Spotify. Like you just go on Spotify. Everyone needs to experiment with it, but there is really good research that does show that it actually helps with anxiety.
How amazing too, because I think for anyone who is maybe newer to coming into mindfulness, meditation can very much have this sort of like overwhelming thing attached to it. It's like, okay, I've got to sit down and I've got to quiet my mind and I've got to do it for 30 minutes a day. And that can feel like a lot of resistance can come up. I know it has for me. And, you know, you can kind of stop before you even get started. Totally. But the idea of just being able to like play this sound, these binaural beats, and that can actually help you get into a more regulated state, which is what we use mindfulness for. It's what we use meditation for. It feels like you just said so much more accessible that it's like, oh, I can definitely press play on a track and sit and listen to it. If you're doing this, you need to be sitting still and listening to it, or can it be helpful, like, to even just have it on in the background if you're not yet at a place where you're like being able to bring yourself to sit down for 30 minutes every day? Because I know it seems silly, but that can be a huge roadblock for people of like, oh, I've got to sit down and do nothing for 30 minutes in our world where we're like constantly occupied.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I'll say a couple things. So research does show intentionally listening to sound is best before a task or during a break.
Okay.
So that is best. That being said, I think people and folks should experiment with what feels best for them because, I mean, I love research, but there are always going to be kind of outliers to that. Is outliers a word?
Outliers.
Outliers. Yeah. Outliers to kind of to that too, right? And I would say some kind of ideas in how you can potentially make it more accessible is, so say if you have a hard time falling asleep, popping on a 30-minute track before bed and just listening to that before bed could be an easy way to do it. I, though, personally, even though the research does say, you know, listen to it before a task or during a break, I have experimented with listening to binaural beats, say during work, if I'm feeling anxious or if I'm wanting to journal in the morning, and it has helped soothe my nervous system. But I will say the most benefit I've felt has been when I'm intentionally sitting down to listen to sound baths or binaural beats. The good thing, though, is that the research also shows that we just need as little as 10 minutes of therapeutic sound to see a benefit. So actually 10 to 30 minutes is the ideal range to listen to sound and music kind of intentionally, where the peak was actually 30 minutes. So we don't actually need anything more than 30 minutes. You could, but research has shown that like
it's not harmful.
Yeah, it's not harmful. No. But it's like we actually don't need that much of it to feel the difference, which is cool.
Wow, that's so cool too, to just know that it's like in 10 minutes a day of putting this on, you could put it on, like you said, just before you get into your day, or I think the idea of taking a break during the day and having this as like a focus, kind of like almost that habit stacking idea, right? They're like, you know, we know that we need to take more breaks during the day. And I know my brain likes to have a task associated with a break, which I know is ridiculous. But this idea of like, okay, I'm going to take a 10-minute break. I'm going to put it on a 10-minute, you know, binaural beat or sound bath or whatever that is, and just relax. And I'm glad you did say that, because while I'm very intentional on this podcast about making sure things are really accessible, and that those barriers that I know I faced for many, many years of getting down to mindfulness, to meditation, to breath work, all of that really stopped me for a really long time. And so the only way that it ended up working is that I broke it down into like really tiny little things, like literally 3 deep breaths, and then built from there and built that habit. It still is important to understand that the point of mindfulness is that intentionality and that taking a break from the buzzing world around us. And that is still the goal. It's just like, these could be the ways that you could get yourself into it, by putting on these beats while you're doing stuff, and then maybe getting to a point where you're like, okay, I'm actually going to take a full break and listen.
Totally.
You know?
Totally. And I mean, there are other ways, like we could chat about even outside of these tracks. Like it could be as simple as going for a walk outside and just noticing the sounds you hear. There's a lot of research around, it's called biophilic sounds, which is essentially just like natural sounds. So bird song, rain can actually help regulate our nervous system and help us feel better too, because it mimics the sound from an evolutionary perspective. When birds are chirping, it signals safety. So even these small things like going for a walk, yeah, I mean, like we can get creative, being in nature, or even like I did this exercise where if you go to a cafe, take like 5 minutes just to observe the sounds around you to ground into the space. So there are so many creative ways we can tap into sound and use it to just, I think really it's like slowing down, as you said, becoming more mindful of our environment and present in the moment.
Your senses are like an amazing way to do that. And talked about this on, I believe it was a few episodes ago, Step Away from Stress, talking about how chronic stress is very detrimental to our long-term health, and how we can kind of untangle from that. And one of the exercises that I shared was about orienting, and this idea, which I think you know about, which is simply just being in a space and exactly what you described, slowing down intentionally and noticing 3 things you see and 3 things you hear. And when we engage with our senses in that intentional way, it signals to the nervous system that we're safe, like you just said, because it's like, not only, you know, if birds are chirping, that's safe, because if there was danger, I guess birds would stop chirping, and then that could be, you know, a signal. But also, even more simply, if you are safe, you are able to take in these pieces about your environment. If you are in danger, in threat mode, your hearing changes when your nervous system shifts into like a survival, fight, flight mode. So you can't actually hear as much of your environment as you normally would. So therefore, if you are able to take in all of these sort of background sounds, like you said, even just going to a cafe and seeing what can you hear, and then maybe even getting more intentional about the next layer down and the next layer down. What are the things that we tune out normally in our everyday, and then what can we actually intentionally bring in? That is an immediate signal to your nervous system that you're safe, because you wouldn't be doing that if you were fleeing in a dangerous situation, kind of thing. And so I think it's so amazing once we start learning the science behind how impactful simply going to a cafe and just tuning in to what can you hear, at least me, it motivates me more, because it's like, oh, in 10 minutes, I could change my entire state for the day. And that feels very worth taking the 10 minutes out of your day to do.
Yes, absolutely. And one other kind of quick exercise, I know you're really into the nervous system and all the polyvagal theory and everything, and vagus nerve, is humming. So humming is a really, really accessible way. If you don't have speakers, if you don't have your, like, use your body, right? So humming the vowels is a really simple and effective technique also, because when we hum, that activates our vocal cords, which stimulates the vagus nerve, which essentially regulates our parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest system. So a really simple exercise I like is just humming the vowels, which is essentially sounds like A, E, I, O, U. Do you want to try it?
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay, so
are
you ready?
Yeah.
A, E,
with us if you're listening. It is wild, like how quickly that shifts. Like I can feel, and I do feel that this has come from like building up a lot of body attunement, which comes from doing these exercises and then realizing kind of the aftermath of the effects that they have. As we're doing that, even the first I could feel my body down regulating. And the same thing happens to me actually when I'm at other ship and the guides do the tuning forks for me. I don't know if you've ever been to other ship, but after you do an ice bath, they do the tuning forks. Sometimes you can ask, but they'll do the tuning forks. And I have noticed in that state of like focus and clarity, I can literally feel my body internally melting, which is to me the down regulating feeling of my nervous system, where that humming or that tuning fork vibration in your ears has that effect of like an instant calming relaxation.
Oh my gosh.
Which is
absolutely
so powerful. And like, I know that that's a lot of the work that you sort of focus on is that ability, like you said, to calm and down regulate. And I know a while back you put together, was it playlists for plane anxiety? Can you chat a little bit more about that? Because when you first announced that, I was like, that is so cool and so smart.
Yeah, and I have some exciting news around that, so I can share a little bit about that too. But yeah, so essentially, when it comes to airplane anxiety, I personally have experienced anxiety flying ever since I was a kid. I would self-medicate with gravel, and I just hated the feeling of being groggy after a flight.
Gravel and allergy medicine takes me out. I have to sleep before I'm a human again.
Totally. So as much as it helps with the nausea and all those things, it also affects how you feel after. Exactly. To sleep it off. I mean, when you travel, you don't have much time.
Yeah.
And so after studying sound therapy and the nervous system, I was just like, let me try listening to sound baths to see if it actually would help regulate my nervous system, because I do believe, obviously like anxiety does come from our nervous system being dysregulated.
Yeah.
So I had a short haul flight. I think it was just to Montreal, and I experimented listening to sound baths, and it worked. I did not medicate. I was totally fine. No nausea, no anxiety. I was fine. And so I've been actually testing that out subsequently on flights I've had, longer flights as well, and it has worked. So what I did was I just put out a call out to see, are other people experiencing airplane anxiety? Essentially just surveying folks on where they experience anxiety, what they use to cope. And what I found was a lot of folks experience anxiety during takeoff and turbulence. So I've created a 30-minute track for airplane anxiety, which I'm going to be releasing also next week, like on the 11th. So it's a 30-minute track that is essentially created to help someone through a 30-minute portion, which in my research, turbulence is usually no longer than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That process from takeoff to altitude is no longer than 30 minutes. So that 30-minute track is also, research shows that's the sweet spot for calm and relaxation. So anyway, I'm going to be releasing that for free next Friday, along with those other tracks I spoke to you about in connection with anxiety. But there's, I think, a lot of potential there for folks who do experience anxiety traveling. I've also used it because I do experience car sickness sometimes.
Yeah.
And it works with that too.
So it works with nausea, not just anxiety, but nausea.
Nausea is a big part of it, because I do believe nausea is connected to our nervous system being dysregulated.
Oh, that makes sense. Yep. Totally.
If you really think about it, right?
Yep,
there is a connection there.
Yep.
So that's why I experimented with that too, and it helped. And so I think there's a lot of benefit we can see when we just regulate our nervous system or find ways to regulate.
Interesting, because I experience motion sickness quite significantly. Less so on planes now. When I was little, it definitely was like bad on planes. Now it's more just cars and boats, and like it, when it's like really windy. So often when you're on vacation. And I'm 100% going to try that and see.
Try it out. So since I put out that survey, I've had a few people say that it's helped them with flying especially. And so I'm just like, okay, this is cool. This is something that we don't really think about. We're often, like breathing obviously is very important.
Yeah.
But sound, a lot of people call it like the lazy person's meditation because it just like it entrains our brain. Like we don't have to do anything. We just have to listen.
Yeah.
And so it's a really accessible way for people to just explore relaxation without having to have that discipline of like silent meditation.
I love that. I really do, because like that accessibility I think is so important, especially when people are starting their journeys or getting back into their journeys, right?
Exactly.
Life happens, you get out of your routine and it's like, okay, I need something to help me get back into that sort of discipline and that connection to the practice. And this sounds like a perfect gateway to do that.
Nice.
Amazing. Well, I will definitely be using, because I experience flight anxiety as well, and I will definitely be using that track for my next flight, 100%. All right. So, and we've touched on this a little bit already, but could you give our listeners ways that they can intentionally incorporate sound? Earlier made that distinction between music and sound. So specifically sound into their daily lives to help sort of reconnect and regulate.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say there are 5 kind of main areas that folks can explore. And I'll say first and foremost, I highly encourage people to experiment. I think with sound, music, it is super subjective. And I've even seen where some folks who have tinnitus or tinnitus, as some people call it, sound baths are actually not great because it mirrors the sound of the tinnitus.
Yeah.
And so I would say 5 kind of main ways. Explore binaural beats like we've mentioned. So binaural beats can be found on Spotify, YouTube. There's so many great resources. Sound baths, which we'll be exploring shortly. So sound bath being just a really relaxing, ambient, guided experience where you'll be essentially listening to different instruments that help the body relax. And one big thing about sound baths is that it's randomized sound. So it helps the brain settle into that more passive state too. Third, I would say would be like noise. So if maybe some of your listeners have heard of something called like white noise.
Oh, yes.
So white noise is kind of like we hear the fan kind of going in the house, but there are different colors of noise. And depending on where the frequencies kind of aggregate most, there'll be lower frequencies in certain noise. So for instance, brown noise and pink noise, I would recommend for calming the mind and masking any external sounds.
Okay.
Really great. So the fourth one would be tapping into nature. So going on a nature walk or just simply searching up various nature sounds like rain or bird song, really, really soothing for the nervous system.
I love the beach too, like the waves crashing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I have something that you'll like. I have an ocean drum.
Oh,
where
I
so,
love the ocean.
So there are so many different sounds that we can like explore. A rain stick is really beautiful too. So yeah, nature.
Yeah.
Like tapping into the sounds of nature.
Yeah.
And finally, humming the vowels, which we did already. And that's a really simple technique. If you don't have access to technology, really tune into your body to help regulate.
Yeah. And you can do that kind of anywhere. I mean, a lot of this you can do anywhere, especially if you do, like you said, you have your headphones or whatever, or access to just go walk outside and really anywhere. I know we think we live in a city and like we think, oh, you have to leave the city to get nature, but there is nature on your doorstep. There's the sound of the leaves ruffling in the trees. There's sounds of birds, all of that kind of stuff. And sometimes I think we tune it out so we forget. But when we go into it intentionally and think, okay, I'm going to go outside right now, I'm going to try to hear 5 different bird sounds.
Yes.
Then it becomes a little bit of like a game, which is fun, but it allows that, I think that element of then really finding like the differentiating sounds, which becomes a mindful practice, an intentional practice of engaging with the senses. I love that. Thank you for that recap. Just so beautiful and so accessible in the way that we can bring it into our everyday.
Yeah. And you can get fun with it too. I love what you just said about kind of, going into nature and like identifying those sounds. Like you can even make a fun ritual out of it where, you have like a track that has bird song and then maybe you tap into the senses and, have pine essential oil or like you can really create something at home where you're if you can't, travel out to a cottage or something, you can create that environment really at home with the sounds that really resonate to
The
you.
full sensory experience
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
smell and the sound. I love that. I
Yeah.
never would have thought to pair those two, but that's such a,
It could be fun.
it's especially like I just said, when you live in a city, it really feels like you have to delay
Exactly.
having that nature
Yes.
experience. And you've just explained exactly how to have it
Yeah.
every single day if you
Yeah.
want, which I love. And what's very exciting is shortly, Bianca is going to do, she referenced this, but she's going to do a sound bath for us. So one of those ways that she just mentioned of intentionally bringing sound into your everyday, you can experience at the end of this episode. But before we get there, I want to go into our rapid-ish fire questions.
Okay.
So the first one is, what is something that you used to hide that you now lead with?
I'm like so awkward, to be honest. And I think before I tried to come across as this like pretty polished girl.
Yeah.
And I just embrace the fact that I am neurodivergent. I am also just awkward. And I love it. I'm like, that's just me. I'm just like, I have my quirks
Yeah.
and I don't always love being around people. And I'm introverted and all these things that I used to feel like I should have hid from the world. I just embrace now. I'm like, yeah, I don't always want to be around people, or I need silence. I need quiet. Like I need my downtime, and just that is who I am. And
Yeah.
I just embrace it. And it has freed up a lot of capacity and energy. And yeah,
I love that. Oh, I love that so much. I quite relate to
I was
that
going to say, I
answer.
feel like
Yeah.
you can feel that.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so you have gone on quite a journey since being in corporate, which is what you did before becoming a DJ and then a sound therapist.
Yes.
So what would you say to someone who's afraid of taking that leap into the thing that is pulling them next in their life, whether that be in career or just generally in life?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I give kudos to myself because I always had a desire to experiment and be in those environments that excited me.
Yeah.
So I, at a point, was really interested in fashion. And so while I was working my corporate 9 to 5 job, I was interning at a fashion label with DJing. I was learning that on the side. And then I started to DJ. I learned how to DJ, started to DJ. And so it's important, I would say, for folks, if there's something that's really pulling you or your intuition's calling you towards, just experiment with it. If it's, say, music, go to a show or, like listen to that music or watch YouTube videos that speak to that type of music that you'd want to create. So I think being in those environments is really powerful to feel it, and also quite honestly to see if it's actually for you, because I feel a lot of people, especially with social media, they're like, oh, I want to do this thing, I want to be a DJ, and then you actually get up there on the decks and you're like, I hate this. So experiment. I think it's really important for people to explore those environments and also experiment with them.
Yes, I love that. It's like you don't have to jump all in
No.
like right away.
No,
It's like test the
exactly.
waters,
Yes.
see what feels good, what doesn't, 100%. Because also
Yes.
we as humans could be excited by a lot of things. There's possibly many different passions, especially those among us who are neurodivergent who want to do all the things. And it's like, okay, that's great, but like which thing do you stick with? So experiment with a bunch and then and then follow the threads. I love
Oh my
that
gosh.
answer so much.
Yes.
Okay. What do you think the world needs to hear right now?
There's like two things that come to mind.
Yeah.
The first one being we need to like embrace peace. Like the word peace is coming to mind. And then the other, which has been sitting on my heart a lot, is that we're actually not so different. So I feel like right now we're living in such a polarizing time where we are almost kind of made to believe we're all super different because of our, political views, our religious views, like all those things.
Yeah.
And at least in my studies and what I've experienced is like we're all kind of need this very similar things. We crave safety, we want connection, and we want to express ourselves. And these are all fundamental things that we all need and likely want. And I feel like in the time we're living in right now, it feels like it's pulling us apart and dividing us from
Acting as if
those,
we don't all want it.
that's just it. And it's like, I hope more people can see that we're probably more similar than we actually think.
Then the narrative is
Then the
leading
narrative.
us to believe for sure.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that. Okay. And finally, how can people get more of you?
So my handles are at with Bianca Lee, and you can find me with biancalee.com. and with Bianca Lee on Instagram. I'm most active, I would say, on Instagram. And you can find me on Spotify. And then
Amazing. We'll put your like links and stuff in the show notes. But yeah, if you can share, we kind of touched on it a little bit throughout the episode, but if you can share what's available to people, if they're like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm really loving this sound idea. I'd love to like dive more into maybe that 10 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day.
Yeah. So I have on my website available a bundle for purchase. So a 5, 10, and 15-minute sound bath created specifically for anxiety. And also, if you sign up for my mailing list, there is a 30-minute version of that sound bath for anxiety, which has been designed more for like a travel perspective, but can be used in any anxious situation. And yeah.
So, okay, amazing. And Bianca has like really, because of your experience as a DJ and working in sound for so long, you've really like mixed and mastered these sound baths to be like an exquisite listening experience, right? I just
You're
know,
so sweet.
I know what you put into what you do and like how intentional that experience is. And I know that they're going to be amazing. I know I will be on there getting them for myself. So yeah.
Thank you. Yes, they're like professionally mixed and mastered, and definitely use my knowledge of music theory to kind of create that environment where it feels harmonious, and using that knowledge to hopefully create something really beautiful for folks.
Amazing. So I think that would be an amazing next step for people.
Thank you.
And if you are still like, I'm not sure, what is a sound bath even, then we are going to give you a little preview.
Yes.
So let's dive in.
Okay. Hi, everyone. We're now going to move into our sound bath. So if you'd like to grab some earphones or headphones for the best audio experience, I would highly suggest doing that now. And once you have that ready, find a comfortable seated position, or you can lie down for this. Over the next 10 minutes, you'll be hearing various sound healing instruments. It'll be playing to help you relax. So close your eyes or soften your gaze. And you'll hear the sound of the ocean drum. Just imagine it clearing any energy that is no longer serving you. This time is for you to relax and simply receive the sounds. And I will guide you back at the end of our journey together. You can begin to take a nice deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. It'll wiggle your fingers and toes, bringing a little bit of movement and energy back into your body. And at your own pace, you can gently blink open your eyes. Thank you for joining me for this short sound bath meditation. Thank you very much and hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.